Special episode, English version. Every day I've learned something is a good day. Geoff Peters, fundraising guru, today in our show of the Blaufuchs. Hi Geoff, it's very nice to have you on the show, and I see that you are in a very, very nice place. Could you tell us, please, who you are? Introduce yourself a little bit, and I'm sure most of the listeners know who you are. But to tick this off the list, please, this would be great. And where you are, it's a very nice surrounding where you live.
Well, my name is Geoff Peters. I'm with a company in the U.S. called Moore Group. I'm the chairman of the Moore Group, and I'm already at 50% retired. So I spend the rest of my time in this lovely location in Northern California, but it looks a little bit like Tuscany. And the reason for that is because it's an olive farm. And I never grew up on a farm. I lived in cities my whole life. I never worked on a farm in my life, but it seemed like a nice place to spend half the time working with nonprofits and the other half the time learning a new business called farming, or an old business called farming.
Farming, and it's olive farming, which is a very special kind of farming. So it's in the Sonoma Valley. That's I think it's near San Francisco, isn't it, in California?
It's 2 hours north of San Francisco in the county of Sonoma. And I'm not the only olive farmer here. Most of the people here grow wine grapes, and it's known for wine, but I actually prefer olives because they're less labor intensive than wine grapes.
I can affirm this, because when I was young, I live and I was raised in an area where wine is grown in Rhineland-Palatinate. And in my youth, I was picking wine for the family of a school friend of mine. So this was always in fall. We were picking wine there, and it was quite a tough job. But the best thing was, after the picking, we had a very nice meal with the local produce, and we tested the wine also. So
one of the things that I've learned living on a farm is growing your own food. So about 50% of the food we eat every year comes from our own farm, because in addition to the olive trees, we have fruit trees and nut trees and vegetable gardens and so forth. And the whole farm is biodiverse and organic, so the food is fresh from the ground and healthy.
Wow, that sounds great. And this from a city boy who always lived in the cities. A city was also the place where we first met. I think I was when it was clear that we talked to each other. I was looking in my memory where we met first. I think it was in Sandford. As far as I remember, it was a workshop which we were doing because we were about to setting up the global fundraising task force at WWF, and you did the research in the key market for us. Can you remember that?
I do. I spent many wonderful years traveling around the world and identifying markets, and I actually had the pleasure of working in 24 different markets all throughout Europe, and then some in Asia and South America. But over a period of years, I was able to do fundraising for nonprofits in 24 markets, plus the 25th market is the US. So I've had a lot of fun. Most of my work today is based out of the US. My company was actually based out in Holland, was purchased by a German firm a number of years ago. So I moved back with focusing on the North American market. But I still have a very fond spot in my heart for all my European friends. And a good 10, 15 years of my life was spent working in that area, and I still teach every year whenever we have it. Because of COVID, we didn't have it this year, but I teach every year at the International Fundraising Conference in Holland.
Geoff, could you please tell us a little bit about donors and success?
The donors are, they change over time, but less changes than one might think.
Yeah.
The bottom line still is that the job of the marketer for a nonprofit is to make an emotional connection to the donor that will last. And that's why we use the metrics that we use, like long-term value, because we're not interested in one gift, we're interested in a relationship. And that is a lesson I learned early on as I was trying to study which nonprofits were the most successful. And it's a lesson I took with me when I went on my adventures in multiple countries around the world, initially Europe and then eventually other countries as well, other continents. But it also led me many years later, now about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, I founded something called the NeuroFundraising Laboratory.
Yeah.
And it was based on the exact same thing, which was, how can I measure the connection that I attempt to make with the donor? And in the old days, we used to do surveys. We asked questions.
Yes.
But when you do a survey, the problem is the person has in mind what you might want to hear. And so they don't always tell you what's really on their mind. They tell you what they think you want to hear.
Yeah.
And so surveys were, frankly, not very useful in predicting behavior of donors. And so surveys, I discarded them fairly quickly because I found that they were not reliable. And then the next most reliable thing in direct marketing was testing. And you tested idea A against idea B, and then the one that would win would tell you what you should do.
Yes.
The problem with testing that way is that you have to come up with idea A and idea B, and you don't always know why one won. You know that B won over A, but you don't know why it won over A.
Yeah.
And so when I finally discovered neuromarketing being done in the commercial world as a new science in the commercial world, and I said, well, I wonder if this might work in the nonprofit world as well. And at first I was reading lots of journal articles and books and information from the commercial people, and we tested a few ideas, and interestingly enough, many of them worked. So we then looked at what the commercial world was doing, and we found out that they had laboratories, and they were actually testing subjects in laboratories to see how they would react to the stimulus of an advertisement. And I said, okay, well, we need to do that in the nonprofit world. So I went to one of the laboratories and I said, we would like to do a test with a charity. And of course, we have almost no money to pay you. And they said, well, it costs 30,000 US to do a single test.
Oh, wow.
And I said, that's not going to work. For something that's not proven, unknown, no one's going to pay 30,000 US. And fortunately, I ran across a neuroscientist who had his own laboratory at a university. And he told me how he set up his laboratory. And so he actually helped us set up our own laboratory where we could start testing donors on how they actually think. What do they look at? What do they read? What do they not read? What attracts their attention and what emotionally engages them? And so for the last 5 years, we've been doing studies on direct mail, on digital, on direct response television, on branding, on what works with nonprofits. And it's interesting because there is a lot to be learned from the commercial world. The difference is their budgets are much bigger. So I went to a conference on neuromarketing I was the only one in the entire room from a nonprofit. Everyone else was commercial. And the first speaker stood up, and they were from a company called Airbnb, sort of a renting space commercially.
Yeah.
And the person is the head of behavioral science for Airbnb, and she stood up and she said, "Last year I did 4,700 tests." And I was sitting there thinking, like, in my lab I did 18. So then the next person stood up, and they were from Uber, the ride sharing company. And they stood up and they said, "Last year I did 7,000 tests." And I'm sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, I'm never going to be able to catch up to these people. But there is a lot to be learned from the commercial companies.
Yeah.
And the more we pay attention to that and then apply the learnings, some of what they do is not relevant to us, like placement of objects in a retail store. That's really hardly ever applicable to a nonprofit.
Yeah.
But understanding digital behavior, understanding how people respond to direct mail, understanding television, and how people respond to advertising actually helps nonprofits. And we've now proven through enough studies and enough research that it actually does improve the overall response, sometimes dramatically.
That's very, very interesting. I came to a similar conclusion a couple of years ago, that when I heard that they're doing neuromarketing in commercial world, and I couldn't find at this time I couldn't find somebody who's doing such things in our world. So I was thinking about how could this apply to us, and how could this work. And actually, my daughter was just finishing her studies in psychology, and she was looking for an what's the name of this when you do your exams and you need a thesis? She needed her thesis, and then we came to the conclusion that it would be a good idea to make a thesis about emotions in DRTV. And she did that, and this gave us a little bit insight into what moves the people to give on DRTV spots, you know. And this was the starting thing when I was thinking about that, but it never came so far as you did. I'm still struggling a little bit with the 30,000 euros that you have to pay to do such things. But I hear now that it's that you developed it very far. Where is your studio situated? Where is it located?
It's in the middle of the United States. It's in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The people there are fairly representative of the entire country and of donors. They tend to be a little bit older, like most donors tend to be in most countries. And so we're able to pull samples, and we typically pull somewhere above 100 people in for any particular panel to review materials. We attach eye tracking so we can see exactly what they're looking at. Where is their eye attracted to on a page or on a digital image or in a video? We attach galvanic skin response monitor. Yeah. We attach electroencephalograph, which measures the brain waves. Yeah. We attach a variety of different tools, and then we measure literally second by second what happens as they engage with the solicitation material in order to understand what's really happening. And sometimes what we do is we prove what many people in the industry already knew. For example, emotional storytelling works really well. We already knew that pretty much. It's not a big surprise. But at other times, I remember one television situation. We had a dispute. The senior fundraisers in the room all said,
Yeah.
if you just show the phone number and the URL, you're going to lose the emotional attachments. So you need to have pictures of the children that are needing food along with the phone number and the URL. And other people said, no, it's a distraction. They're looking at the children's faces. They're not looking at the URL. So we did an A/B split test.
Yeah.
We did one version with the children's faces and one version with just a screen that showed the information. What we found was that the level of engagement did go down when the children's faces were not there, but the level of memory retention afterward, when we tested people, what is the phone number or what is the URL, went up 70%. Because instead of being distracted with looking in the eyes of children, they were in fact looking at the phone number and the URL, and they remembered it. So which was more important, engagement or remembering how to contact the charity and make a donation? So we went out in the real world and spent a fair amount of money doing advertising with two different versions, one version A and the other version B. And we found out that the lab correctly predicted that the blank slate version was better, even though the engagement was lower. As long as the engagement was high during the ad, when you finally gave them the information of how to donate, then the memory was more important because it taught them what to do. And what we later discovered was donors who had been motivated couldn't remember how to get hold of the charity. And by focusing on memory as opposed to engagement at that last moment, we were able to increase the response almost 70%.
Okay. That's even more important when you have a certain landing page where you would like to have the potential donor to go. He might maybe remember the name of the organization and he Googles it and then comes to the usual website. But if you really want them to go to a certain place, to a certain landing page, then this is very, very important. Who is using these things? These big organizations are. How do they look, and for whom is it? Does it pay?
Mostly it's medium to large. There's really, really small charities. What we do to help them is we take lessons we've learned from the testing we've done, and without doing a new test, we assume that the same principles that we learned would apply to the smaller charities. So we don't actually take them into the lab because it's too expensive for the small charities.
Yeah.
For the medium-sized and larger charities, we go into the lab because if you can produce a 10% increase and you're going to spend $1 million US on television advertising time, getting a 10% better result, it's worth it.
Yeah.
And the lab cost, we don't charge $30,000 like the commercial labs do. The lab cost for us to do testing is more like about $8,000. So we are able to make an investment of $8,000 produce more than the $8,000 cost in terms of improved result for the larger and medium-sized charities. But again, for the small charities, still paying attention to what works and what doesn't work for the others is useful for you making good choices and good educated guesses about what's likely to work for you.
That sounds really, really great, and it sounds like fundraising heaven. Especially when it comes not only to calculable things, but finding out which words work or which pictures work.
Yeah,
This is really crazy This is really crazy because, of course, that you have variables, mathematical variables, and the machine tells you about what is quite successful and what not, and so on. This is quite, yeah. We know that, but that they are thinking about which words and which pictures work. This is really crazy. When you
it does require large amounts of data.
Yeah, of course.
So, for example, in the database that we most commonly use, we have 800 million transactions.
Oh my!
so you have to have a large amount of data to be able to do that kind of precise modeling down to the individual level. But and some of the things you find are not surprising. We find, for example, that people who buy expensive dog food brands give larger amounts of money to animal welfare charities. That's not too surprising, but it does tell you now that if you have a list of people who buy expensive dog food brands, some of them who have never donated to a charity, maybe you ought to try soliciting them to donate to a charity, because when they do give, the value of their gift will be greater.
Yeah.
So maybe it's worth doing. So there's all kinds of little lessons you learn, but it still takes the human to sit there and understand what's going on in order to come up with the new solicitation.
Yeah. This is what just came to my mind. At the end, it's the same thing which we did 30 years ago, but our methods to find out what exactly can we ask and with which data can we work has dramatically grown. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this is a very special. This is a very special task that we have now. But when you think back to the time when you started with fundraising, I think it would be direct mail in a very quite easy way. And now you're talking not only about neurofundraising and but even artificial intelligence. This is a span of what happened in this time. It's gorgeous where we moved from simply writing. I remember the former mission director of CVM, Christian Blind Mission, who was writing still sometimes with handwriting and so on, and added lies in his letters on the paper that it looks like it comes from Kenya, from a tent, and he was writing in that fashion. He was writing, I'm sitting here in the bush of Kenya, writing you, and by the light of a gas lamp, such things, and to what we are doing today, isn't it crazy? What interests me very much is in this podcast, not only talking about these fancy techniques and all these things, but about the people who are driven by that. And my question is really, what, Geoff, you are so long now in that trade. What really drives you? And you can't stop. I always hear every time when we meet you say, I'm getting retired, and then it's something else. What is it? What drives you?
I truly believe that any day you don't learn something new is a wasted day. And so even though I've been in the nonprofit space for 40 plus years, even though I have been here a long time, and I remember the old methods and the things we started many years ago, you have to be open to change. You have to be open to learning new things.
Yes.
And if you aren't, you will become at first old-fashioned, and then you'll be on an island, and then the island will be submerged by growing height of water and you'll be under the water, because you have to learn that not everything stays the same. Technology gives us new opportunities. People are still people. Neuroscience teaches us that many of the reactions that people have come from the days when we all lived in caves. The fact that it only takes 13 1,000ths of 1 second for people to recognize a familiar face. That's the reason for that is because when we did live in caves, you had to make a very, very quick decision when the bear was at the door of the cave. Do I run toward the bear because he's dinner, or do I run away from the bear because I'm dinner? And we had to learn that. And your brain is really that old that it still responds the same way, with visual images being processed faster than any logic or thinking or awareness or anything else. And so the neuroscience teaches us that our brain really hasn't, in many fundamental ways, changed a lot in 200,000 years. But the technologies by which we can study these things have changed dramatically and continue to change. And so any day you can learn a new skill, and any day you can learn a new way to look at the information and gain better insight is a good day. Learning all your life is, many people have said it in many other businesses, not just fundraising, but learning all your life is an important part of living a good life. And I'm farming now. I never lived on a farm, never was raised on a farm, but I'm learning a new skill. I'm learning about olives. I'm learning about the earth. I'm learning about the weather. I'm learning about a lot of things that affect farming. And the only part of the farm experience that I had any experience with before farming was marketing. And it's only a small part of farming. So,
yeah, that's true.
but every day you learn something new. It's a good day.
Yeah, I think that's a very nice closing word. I'm very happy that you joined me in this show. We know each other, as I said before, a very long time. We worked together several times, and it was always fruitful, and I always learned from it. So it was a pleasure for me to have you on the show, and I hope the people out there are like it as well, and have learned a little bit. And I can only advise to them, listen to this guy, and when he's on the list of a congress or a conference, make sure that you go there and listen to him. He has always something to say, which is very important and funny. Geoff, thanks a lot. Take care, and hope to see you soon.
It's good to see you. And the next thing I hope to learn, I learn from you about how to do blogging.
That's what we do.
The following message is for our German-speaking listeners. Das war Geoff Peters, mein persönlicher Fundraising-Guru und Freund seit fast 20 Jahren. Und das war auch die letzte Folge der Staffel 2 vom Blaufuchs. Wir nehmen eine kleine kreative Auszeit über den Advent, Weihnachten und Neujahr. Aber wir werden in dieser Zeit nicht tatenlos sein. Der Blaufuchs durchläuft im Hintergrund eine Winterkur. Und am 22. Januar wird der Blaufuchs im neuen Gewand und mit neuen Inhalten starten. Es gibt einen Relaunch der Webseite, die sich zu einer Plattform mit einem Multi-Autoren-Blog als Kernstück entwickelt, flankiert vom Podcast und Videos. Die Themen und Personen kommen weiterhin aus dem Bereich der Zivilgesellschaft und den NGOs, aber mit einer breiteren Themenvielfalt. Beim Blaufuchs interessieren uns vor allem die Menschen hinter den Themen und das soll auch noch stärker zum Ausdruck kommen. Ich hoffe, ihr haltet mir die Treue und wünsche allen Hörern ein friedliches Weihnachtsfest und uns allen, dass wir die Prüfung, die uns mit Covid-19 auferlegt wurde, alle gesund überstehen. Bis 2021, auf Wiedersehen und passt gut auf euch auf. Euer Blaufuchs Olaf Baumann.